guys, and welcome back to the Talkoffamepod podcast. I'm your host, Kyliemontigney, and today we have Ian Mark. He's an actor, producer, director, improviser, and author. His debate novel, Love from Amanda to Zoe, published back in February of 2018 from Simon and Schuster, I think you say it. But he stars in an upcoming feature on More Perfect Union alongside Blaze Hall, with whom he directed, wrote, and produced the film. He also directed, produced, wrote, and acted in He's That Guy, starring George Warner. And he won Best First Time Director at FilmCon, as well as a number of other selections at various festivals. He's also the host and director of the Pasadonuts and their weekly live stream shows on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I literally, to be quite honest with you, I love having hosts and podcasts or this host of different kinds. So every time someone comes on like this, I'm literally so excited. But thank you so much, Eve, for coming on the podcast and taking the time. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to start things off, you have been doing writing for a couple of years now and wrote a variety of different stuff. But how do you kind of, get your foot in the door, as they say in writing?
Well, I think first of all, if you're someone who doesn't feel a burning need and desire, and passion for it, I would advise you to go somewhere else because it is a very slow moving industry and you're going to be faced with a lot of rejection and a lot of people who are like, do we really need writing from you? And if your answer is not absolutely you do, you're probably going to get worn down. For me, I can really only speak to what happened with my novel Love from Amanda to Zoe. Is I found an imprint of Simon and Schuster that was excited about having a young man writing romance, or what they viewed as a romance novel, with a male character as the center. They said that 99% of the submissions they got were written by women about with books that starred women, and that having my kind of POV was exactly what they were looking for. And then they liked the book once they went into it with that sort of lens. That's after I had numerous agents pass. I had other publishers pass. I had plenty of people who I just wasn't what they were looking for. So I would say, to get your foot in the door, you just have to keep knocking on doors. And even if people shut a few doors in your faces, or they look at you and say, why are you knocking on this door? You just got to pick your stuff up, keep going, and move on to the next door. And if your stuff is good, I do believe you will eventually find a home, because a lot of books are not good. So you got to be able to honestly look at yourself and say, is my stuff really ready for prime time? And if you're sure it is, just keep knocking on those doors and find somebody who's going to champion you.
I love that. As a person, I'm sure for you as well, that's severe across many different people in terms of this industry. Like you said, writers industry and the entertainment industry as well is very competitive and picky about which things they pick up. And especially with being a writer, there's a lot of agencies are very picky in terms of, okay, should we pick up this author, or should we add these books? Because even though this book is horrible, should I add this person? Because who knows, their next book might be a success, But with this industry, it really, even after the writer's strike that has ended a few weeks back, it really has, kind of gotten to the groove. Okay, how much should we get paid for being a writer? Or how much do you think we should get for writing different TV shows? Even in case we did reach a deal, the writing industry is always very, I was not strict, but very, I'll say, picky in terms of what they want in terms of selling.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Hollywood even more so than book publishing, although they all do it, right? They want, the classic thing is they want you to show them something different, but something that reminds them of things they've seen before, so they know it's safe and they can see why it would be successful. So be different, but not too different, but not different enough either. And you're always dealing with the biases of the people reading these books or scripts in the case of the WGA stuff. And, it's hard as a writer because it's tempting to try and cater to what you think other people will want, but I don't think that's actually effective. I think the number one thing all of these people are really looking for, even if it's not what they'd say, or some of them definitely say it, is like they want writers who have a unique voice and a strong point of view, and you got to write things that you love and you'll be proud of, and then you'll find out after that like how big of an audience there is that agrees with you.
Exactly. And like I said earlier, you're coming out with a coming feature called A More Perfect Union, where you'll star alongside Blaze Hall. Like, did you know who Blaze was before shooting, or did you kind of had no idea who he was until you guys started filming?
No, Blaze also worked with me on my previous short film. He's that guy. They starred in that short film, and they were a member of my improv group. So we knew each other extremely well. And A More Perfect Union was born out of the COVID lockdown. We looked at each other and basically knew that we would go insane if we had to be stuck inside for a year with nothing to work on. And so we decided to channel our collective passions into the feature that became A More Perfect Union. So I definitely knew them quite well, and definitely know them even better after spending the last 3 years fighting with everything we have to get the movie made and get it to where it is now. And we're very excited to find in the next year like a festival where we're going to premiere it. And we're in talks with distribution companies, and we're trying to find the right home because the independent film landscape is ever changing, and we want to find a way to get as many people to see it as possible, because we really feel like it has broad appeal. And I think people are ready to kind of see a movie that does have COVID as a backdrop. I mean, that's not the whole story. It's not the focus of the story, but I think people are we're far enough removed from it that I do think there's an appetite for it. And we're trying to be that film that's sort of like you watch when you want to remember what that crazy time was like, and also see some really good acting with a story about an NSA whistleblower and his wife who's discovered that their daughter is not actually his, and plenty of other storylines going on while the March 2020 lockdown is happening. And yeah, we're excited to get it out there.
That's so interesting. That seems like my type of thing I'll watch. Because even with the COVID background, as things that happened 3 years ago, it's something often people don't want to go back on, because of course it was a boring, rough period. I didn't not to say that. Because of course when like we were in lockdown 3 years ago, like you said, like we really didn't have really anything to do. We were just stuck at home 24/7 until restrictions were back. We were allowed to go outside, go to restaurants, go to store, go out with friends. Like it really has been a drastic impact, and it made people realize in entertainment that like, oh, we can't work, but I'm still gonna work on projects anyways. But it really was a period of time where people made different projects before while COVID, then start filming or publishing once COVID was over. But like, how did like the COVID, restrictions kind of impact like the feature? Like, do you think if COVID didn't happen, you guys probably wouldn't have shot it?
Probably not. I mean, really, the impetus was knowing that. So I had just booked my first like huge lead role in a feature the year prior, and then COVID scrambled that production, so it was no longer happening. So obviously it's a huge loss, when you're out here acting, to think like, oh, I'm going to be in a picture with like a 7-figure budget and it's like all going to be on my shoulders, and then that goes away. And I think A More Perfect Union was sort of an attempt to be like, okay, well, I don't need them to make a feature. Like we can make a feature right here. And the restrictions definitely made it harder, but they also in a way made it possible, because some of the scenes that we depict in the film, like the NSA whistleblower being on trial for stealing files from the NSA, there's a key scene that's his sentencing hearing, and that takes place on a Skype call. And before COVID, that's not a thing that anyone would understand or recognize. They'd say, why is he not in a courtroom? But instead, it allowed us to have these big huge takes on the whole weight of the world ideas happening in people's homes and apartments, which is mainly where we shot. And we shot the first half of the film before the vaccine came out. And so we had the smallest crew you will ever see on a film set. And thankfully, none of us tested positive for COVID the whole time. We got through without anybody getting sick. And then the next year, once we were vaccinated and we shot the rest of the film, we still had a restricted crew and testing and all that. And it definitely added a lot of hurdles to navigate. But I think the beauty of what we wrote together was something that turned some of those hurdles into advantages. And I think also it's there's very few things in our society that like everybody has universal experience with. And this is one of those things. Like we all remember what it was like hearing about COVID, not thinking it was going to be a huge thing, and then recognizing, all of us recognized at different times, like actually this is going to be a huge thing, and some of us never recognized it, but it gives a universality to the film that otherwise I don't think we would have had a way to capture or even like the inspiration to.
And like, I'm kind of curious, like, especially with filming during COVID, not a lot of films got pushed back. Most like that were being made or pitched but later when the vaccination came out. But when did you guys kind of shoot the film like during COVID? Like it was in like pre-COVID, like mid-COVID at the beginning, or was kind of like late COVID when it's like kind of ending per se?
No, it was pretty early COVID. So we started writing the script in April of 2020, because we basically figured out pretty quickly it was something we wanted to do. And then we shot we shot it in two big chunks. And like phase one of production, as we called it, were all of the scenes that took place with my character Henry in the place that he's staying. And so that was all like he's alone for almost the entire film. So it was a very safe thing for us to shoot because we didn't have to bring in any of the outside actors for some of the other scenes. And everything was like as safe as it could be for a shoot where there was no vaccines yet. And it also kind of let us get our crew, who were very talented people who were willing to work on a lower budget project like ours, because there was no other work around. And so I was like, sure, like, yeah, I'll help you make this movie. It does seem cool. And all of my commercial clients are not working right now. And then we took a break. And about a year later, we shot all of the scenes that take place at Blaze's character's house where they are staying, and all of the other scenes we have that take place at different locations with other actors. And so that shoot was logistically, there was a lot more to handle, but it was also a much safer time. Like we had all been vaccinated by that point, and we all felt, there wasn't that same wave of uncertainty and fear hanging over everything, because this was November of 21 versus the first shoot being in September of 2020.
Like, would you like were from your experience, of course, they're basically a year later when filming. Like, do you think like the like atmosphere and the way people were feeling and their emotions were different from when you guys first shot and then the second time you guys did shoot? Like, do you think there's like mixed emotions from when the vaccination came out versus before it came out?
Yeah, it was definitely a different vibe on set. There were definitely more opportunities around and more competition for crew, and more, life was not normal at that point, but it was starting to get back to some sort of feeling of normality versus the first shoot, when the only thing I was doing for September of 2020 was working on the film. Like I had no other auditions. I had like some of the UGC stuff that you would shoot at home, but nothing like really substantive and at a much lower rate than at other points in my career. And so it had that feeling of this is everything right now. And when we shot the second half, I mean, we still put so much of our time and energy into it, but there was less of that sense of like, this is everything we have, and more a sense of like, this is one of the many things that we are doing and that we're putting our love and time into. And I think that relaxed the vibe on set a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And to kind of, switch back into the writing process,
Mhm.
like how do you typically find inspiration for writing? Because I know with every writer, every inspiration in process is very different for everyone. But like how do you typically find inspiration in writing?
Um, I would say two main things. Like, I am someone who very much believes that if you want to be producing a certain kind of output, you need to calibrate what you are taking on as input. So when I first wrote Love from Amanda to Zoe, I probably read 1,000 books growing up before I tried to write my own. And I read all the time, I read constantly. And so when I started thinking about, after I had written a few short stories, what would it be like for me to try and write a novel? I had this idea for a character that I really wanted to see in a book that I had never seen in a book. And that was someone who like has a brain that works somewhat like mine. And then from that genesis of who the character was, everything else sort of grew from there. But it's different with different projects. Like my second book, which hasn't come out yet, was kind of inspired in direct response to some of the feedback I got when I was trying to publish my first book. And I intentionally was like, let me come up with something more commercial, more fit for the market that people are going to love. And then was driven by this question of like, what is the nature of reality? Is there an objective reality? Does it matter if there's an objective reality? And that was the genesis of a lot of the ideas that I'm exploring in that one. And then when it comes to writing for film, it's really, I have a producer's mindset of like, what is realistically possible? Like, I can put a dragon in this scene, but if we don't have any budget for VFX, like, what's the point of me writing all these like 20 different locations that we can't afford and saying like Tom Cruise is going to be in 5 of these scenes? Like,
Mhm.
I find that when you actually take on what the restrictions that you face are, it breeds creativity, because it's like, okay, I only have X, Y, and Z. So what stories can I tell that are still going to be compelling? And so I've always tried to sort of reverse engineer it from what can we do? And then based on that, what excites me the most.
And like it's honestly like is probably the worst feeling when you don't have enough budget to write what you're looking for. I'm sure it is like the hardest feeling, right?
It is definitely frustrating. It's one of the things I love about writing books, where if I want there to be a 3-headed penguin in the scene, I type the words, there's a 3-headed penguin. And in the book, that's what there is. Whereas if it's a film, anything I write on the page, I got to figure out a way to like physicalize and actualize it, and figure out a way to do it that is cost efficient. Um, and yeah, nothing's worse than having an artistic impulse that you can't follow because of a real world thing like money.
Yeah, like I don't know if you ever seen this movie, but with Stuart Little, it's like an old like 90s early 2000s movie. Like you literally don't have to have like they literally had like a mouse that was fake and drawn into the movie. It was an actual mouse that was talking. Like do you think like having an actual penguin or a kind of fake drawn in one would cost more? Like, which one do you think would cost more in terms of like having it filmed?
Oh, there's no actual penguin in my movie. I was just
I know,
giving an example of like a
I
random,
know, I
but
know.
like, I think having real animals is very expensive
Yeah.
if you're doing it right, and also having any sort of like permanent CGI is also expensive. I couldn't tell you which would cost more really, because it would kind of depend on the minutia of what the penguin's doing. But either thing was not something we were going to put in our film. I mean, there are chickens in our movie, and there's a cat in our movie. But these were more just like things that we happened to have access to that we figured, hey, let's throw it in there. It raises the production value, and was not like through the normal Hollywood channel of like hiring somebody who like is a professional like chicken that has a trainer that you also have to pay and has all of like a handler that you have to pay and all these other like concerns that come up with it. So yeah, I don't really know, I guess, to answer your question.
Yeah, to be honest, I probably draw like getting the actual animal cost so expensive. It probably for like 4 hours of filming. I'll probably say that's probably the most expensive. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong if you're listening to this, but that's probably the more expensive one. But what does it kind of mean to you to be an actor and writer?
Um, that's a good question. I think to me it means like I get to spend my time here on Earth following my creative impulses as a writer and really as an actor too. And then more so on the acting side, I also get to help friends or people I don't know if they cast me, making their visions something that they saw in their head, something that everybody else can see too. And the thing that has brought me the most joy in life is creativity. So having outlets for it that I am lucky enough to be paid for is something that I really, really cherish, and I hope is the case for, ideally the rest of my life. I would love to just be creative in as many ways as I can, if possible.
Yeah, I'm the same exact way. Like I'm literally like every time you see or talk to me, I'm literally always doing something in terms of creativity. I'm always busy trying to, whether it's like maybe writing a book, for example, schoolwork, like writing a paper, doing podcast episodes. Like there's literally a variety of things I'm like always working in terms of creating. But like how do you come to create, like how does the inspiration comes to you in terms of maybe like writing, acting, or anything else that you like to do?
Well, first off, I think that's great that you spend so much time creating. I think it really is a beautiful thing. And I think it's important to have, if you are someone who is financially monetizing some of your creativity, it's good to have other outlets that are also creative for you that you're not focused on monetizing. Like for me, that's playing instruments. I don't do that nearly as well as the other things I do, but it's something when I do it, I'm just doing it for the fun of it. And I think writing inspiration for me just comes from it always comes down to like thinking of myself as a viewer or a reader and thinking, what do I want to see and what will I enjoy? Because I could pick up my book and start reading it, and I would really like reading it as just
Mhm.
a consumer. And as an actor, I love watching myself. I know some actors really don't like watching themselves afterhand, but when I feel like I crushed a take, I love seeing it. I love watching the monitor and seeing it. And I think that's who I'm always trying to like serve. I'm always trying to think, what does Ian as a fan of acting and Ian as a fan of writing like want to consume, and how can I be the person who makes those things?
That's such a great idea. And I'm so jealous that you can watch yourself. Because every time I watch something myself, like in different clips or something, I don't know why, but I absolutely get so self-conscious of myself watching me do different things. Like how like how do you like do you sometimes have that feeling where you're like, oh, I love this clip, but I hate seeing myself talk or am I see myself in this video?
I think I've been doing this for so long now that if I fuck up a line, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but if I mess up a line or something, I don't know that I love watching that back, but there's just some little light that turns on for me every time I see myself on screen, where it's almost like I'm a little kid and I'm like, hey, there's me on the TV. And I've always just tried to like allow that little kid part of myself to have all the space he wants to have a good time and not take any of this too seriously, because if I mess up in acting, like, we just do another take. And I'm not doing surgery out here. I'm not saving anybody's life in a fire. Like, none of this is super high stakes. And I've been fortunate enough that I really like seeing myself on screen. And I've met plenty of people who feel the way you do about themselves. And I don't know that I can really say anything of value for how to switch your mindset, because my mindset has always been in that camp of like, oh yeah, go me. Look at me do the thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I sometimes have that mindset. Like it's like sometimes half and half, depending on the occasion. But if it's like turns to podcast episodes or on other podcasts, I'm just like, no, I'm good. But if it's on television, I'm like, that's totally different. That's me, a little 5-year-old me geeking out that I'm on TV. That's a whole different level. Yeah, but
Yeah.
to go to your book, Amanda to Zoe, it came out back in February of 2018. Like, are any of the characters that you wrote based on real people or people that you know, was all like fictional based?
Well, just real quick, it's Love from Amanda to Zoe. Um, and it's funny is that the main character shares a lot of biographical similarities to myself. We're both from Boston. We're both Jewish, but not particularly religious. We both went to NYU. And so when the book came out and when I was writing the book, I had a lot of my friends at NYU who were like, "Oh, so like, which one am I? Like, so who am I in this?" And the answer I told them is like, "Look, I'm not the main character. I just thought it would be easier if, some of these biographical things he just shares with me, because obviously I have detailed knowledge of Boston. I have detailed knowledge of what it's like to go to NYU. So I'm just writing things that I know. And then the characters, there may be pieces of them that I took from people I knew, but they're all amalgamations of characters I've seen or people I knew, or just random things that I thought worked for in that moment. Like, my writing process for that book was very in the flow, just get it all out and see where it goes. And
Mm.
there's not a single character that's like a one-to-one where you could say this character is based on this real life person and nobody else. Um, it's always interesting when people tell me that they're so sure that they're this character or they're that character. But I'm a fiction writer. I'm not one of those writers who just goes to the cafe and like writes down the conversations they overhear from other people. I
Mhm.
got too much going on up here for me to like rely on everything out here.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm kind of one of those people too. I'd rather just focus on one in the moment than write what everything the person is saying in the conversation. But like, I'm kind of curious since I live in Pennsylvania. I'm a person that goes to New York often. I love New York. And from a person that is kind of interested in NYU for college, like, what was your kind of favorite thing you did at NYU? Like, what was it like for you to go to NYU?
Well, I would say the best thing about NYU is that it is located in Manhattan.
Yeah.
You have access to a group of kids, I mean, I guess young adults who all have a lot of free time on their hands, and NYU has a lot of film equipment, a lot of meeting spaces. And so the community that you can find there is very inspiring, and it's a nice place to kind of figure out what you want to do with your life. And that's how I used it. I don't know that I would say the educational side of what they provide there is particularly worth it considering the cost of it. But it's great living right there in the village. And my favorite thing that I did at NYU that I can talk about in a public forum is probably starting the improv group that I started there called Home Improvement, along with my roommate at the time, Simon Johnston, who just recently got married. So big shout out to him. And we started that freshman year, and it is still going to this day. And I had a blast while I was there doing it. Improv got me into all these other art forms and was really my first sort of like passion in the arts. And I'm proud to think that there's a group of kids at NYU doing improv for home improvement who have no idea who I am and have no connection to me having started the club. It's just a thing that they found that was ongoing. And I think that's really cool to feel like I changed in a small way the landscape of what the art scene is like at NYU.
Yeah, definitely. To go back to love from Amanda to Zoe, like how did you did you write 10,000 words a day for the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how did you write that many words every day mostly?
Well, on the way back from this was my freshman year at NYU. On the way back to Boston for spring break, I realized texting all my high school friends that basically everybody either had spring break the week before I had spring break or the week after I had spring break. So nobody was going to be home for me to hang out with for the 6 days that I was spending back in Boston. And I was quickly realizing I was going to be very, very bored. And I was like, okay, well, I've had this idea for a novel sort of like percolating and growing inside me for a few months. Maybe I'll just try and like bang it out and get it out all out of me this whole week. So I always feel like I have something to do. And so I looked up online like what the expected length for a novel was. And what I found was 60,000, although I think now people would say really it's more like 80 to 90,000, but 60,000 was the benchmark I was given. I knew I had 6 days to get the first draft out. And so I was like, all right, I'll write 10,000 words a day usually in 2,000 word chunks. Like I would wake up in the morning and the first thing I would do is write 2,000 words. And then I would go eat breakfast and, say hi to my parents and do some other stuff. And then I would write another 2,000 words. And then usually I think I would go exercise or do something, come back, write another 2,000 words, and then maybe take like a little break. And then closer to the evening before dinner, I would write 2,000 words. And then right after dinner, I would write 2,000 words. And I tried to always leave off where I knew what the next thing I wanted to write was. So every time I sat down, I would reread like the last line or two. And then I was like, okay, yeah, this is where I'm going. And so it wasn't a lot of staring at the screen, wondering what to go next. It was really just letting my fingers do the walking. And there were some moments where I was writing so fast that the connection between my fingers was moving faster than like I was processing the words in my head. So I would be typing and the words would be appearing on the screen, and it would almost feel like I was reading the book as it appeared on the screen, and like the book was just sort of revealing itself to me. And I didn't get into that flow state every time I wrote. There were plenty of times where I was thinking about what I was going to write and I was writing it, but I was always sort of chasing that high of just the pure bliss of like your fingers moving so fast that this creative experience is happening sort of in front of you, and it's almost like you're just there watching it.
That's crazy that you wrote 10,000 words a day. I could never do that. Like the closest thing I can get each day, probably if I'm writing a book or something, is probably 200 words. That's probably the farthest I would get, which is great. Like amazing that you can do that 10,000 words a day. Like, did it actually take you 6 days to write it, or did it kind of take shorter or longer?
I finished the first draft on the 6th day, right before I was time to go back to New York. I took that draft and I gave it to I came back and I was taking a creative writing class at the time. And after the first class, after the break, I waited and I talked to the teacher and I was like, hey, so over spring break, I wrote a novel. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And I was kind of hoping like you'd take a look at it and tell me if it's any good. because one of the other things I had done was I knew that I didn't have time to like reread my writing. So I would write the 2,000 word chunks. And then when I sat down to like do the next thing, I would do no editing. I did no, like, let me go back, let me fix this. It was all just like, get it all out.
Mm.
And she read it and she thought that once the main love interest Zoe shows up, she was like, give us more of that. Like, I would love to see more of them falling in love, like more of the time where they're happy and like really just like stretch that out a bit. So I added, I think, maybe 2 scenes and made one scene longer. Um, and then obviously there was editing that was done, but I would say 95% of what is in the published version now was in that first draft that I wrote in that week.
Ooh, that's awesome. Like I could have never done that. I give you a round of applause for that one. But like you are the host of Pasadonuts that you've been doing for a while now. That's on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Like, what is kind of Pasadonuts? Like, what would you tell us about it?
So the start of the Pasadonuts was we are a long form improv group. We live stream a show. At this point, it's usually on YouTube or Instagram, and all the episodes are on YouTube at Pasadonuts Improv. We live stream a show every week. We also have recently started performing at the Pack Theater on the third Friday of every month. So this month, December, we're going to be there on the 15th at 8 p.m. So if anyone is in LA, I know you're all the way in Pennsylvania, but anyone in LA or Southern California who's looking for a cheap night of fun, they should come on down to the Pack Theater in Hollywood, and you can find tickets on Eventbrite. And Pasadonuts is now also the name of my production company because when we expanded into making sketches and then this feature, I figured it was just best to do it all under one umbrella. So we're both a long form improv group and sort of a sketch group, and also just like a small boutique production company.
Ooh, that's awesome. Like, how did you kind of like? How do you guys come up with the improvs? Like, is there the same improvs every week, or are there different ones?
No, it's completely new every week. For the last year or so, the format we have done is the audience in advance will vote on which cast member they want to be the hero that week. And then we will get a movie title from the audience and we'll change one word of the movie title. So if it's like No Country for Old Men, we might do a movie that's called No Country for Old Women. Really just simple changes to the title. And then we have a whole new movie. We do a little quick like trailer where we just have a narrator who takes us through sort of some basic beats of what we might see with our hero and who they might meet and some problems they might come across. And then from the trailer, we draw on that to create 20 to 30 minutes of this like made up movie that we are just making up on the fly. And yeah, it's completely new every week. The audience gets to vote who stars in it. The audience gets to give us the title of the movie. And from there, we just sort of go, and we have a really talented cast and some very, very funny people. And we just kind of cook.
Ooh, like I'm kind of curious. Like, were you ever considered the hero of the tops, or you never got the chance yet?
Would I ever consider what?
Like, were you the hero that the audience shows us like ever, or
Yeah.
like it
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet?
No, I've been the hero. I think at this point we've all been the hero. Um, I couldn't tell you how many times. Like, it's sort of like the hero is normally the protagonist and they're in most of the scenes, but there's other characters that are also very important. And I never try and sway the votes any certain way. I think it's fun for all of our members to get a chance to sort of be that center of attention. And since I'm hosting the show, I get plenty of screen time for me to satisfy that little kid who wants to see me do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And last thing I wanted to ask before we head off is what is a lesson that you learned as a host of Pasadonuts?
I think I learned that hosting a show or running an improv group is kind of like playing on a basketball team. And when I played basketball growing up, one of the things I was pretty good at was kind of knowing where everybody on the team was at emotionally, and knowing like, okay, this guy's been rebounding a lot and really playing hard for us, but he hasn't gotten the ball that much on offense. Like, I'm going to get him a layup or something, or I'm going to set him up for the shot he likes. And improv as a host, you're kind of doing the same thing. Like, you're looking at all the people in your cast and trying to figure out what they like doing the most of the different games we play, or of the different things that might happen in our made up movie. And you're just trying to figure out, like, how can I set up these people to be funny? Because I know if I just worry about making everybody around me funny, and everybody around me just worries about making all the people around them funny, we're all going to set each other up, and we're all going to get a lot of easy layups instead of having to like shoot a really hard contested shot on our own, which is kind of what happens if you're just focused on making yourself seem great.
Definitely. And I think that's the perfect way to wrap up this episode. I appreciate everyone for listening. Thank you so much for coming on, Ian, and for having this conversation. I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time, and make sure to everyone to go see his upcoming film. And where can people reach you or connect with you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at the real Ian Mark. You can stay up to date with the Pasadonuts at Pasadonuts on Instagram, or Pasadonuts Improv on YouTube. And there'll be announcements there. Like, you can always check out my website, ianmark.ptnt.com. You can check out the film's website, which is union.ptnt.com. And yeah, follow me there, whatever, reach out. I'm always looking to make stuff. So if you have a project that you're trying to get off the ground, send me an email. My email is available on my website, or DM me on Instagram or whatever. And I take great pleasure and pride in helping other people bring their creative dreams to fruition. So thank you for having me. And this was a lot of fun.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you guys next episode. And thank you, Ian, for coming on. I'll see you and I'll talk to you soon.